بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. This is one of the chapters on the advice of giving zakat, which is one of the compulsory and major important factors in our ibadah. First there's a few ayats of Quran, and then there's a hadith on top of this ayat of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in Surah Al-Qasas, verse number 76 to verse number 82, comes out to be about 7-8 ayats of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions an incident of Qarun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ قَارُونَ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمِ مُوسَى فَبَغَى عَلَيْهِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more or less to the effect, the meaning of these ayats is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that indeed Qarun was from amongst the family of Musa alayhi salam. And when he was told to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obey His commandment, فَبَغَى عَلَيْهِ, he transgressed the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted him wealth, that the ayat of the Quran says that the keys to his treasure was carried by a group of young men. Young men used to carry the keys to his treasure. This is how much wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted him. And the ayat of the Quran continues, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that when he was granted all of this wealth, those people who did not have the yaqeen and the fear of Allah, they used to see Qarun and they used to wish that I wish that I can be like Qarun. Or if I cannot be like Qarun, then my children might be like Qarun. But for those who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they used to tell these people, don't you know that the reward of akhirah is much greater than this? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, a day came afterwards. فَخَسَفْنَا بِهِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then a day came. Then we opened the earth for him, and Qarun and his entire wealth drowned inside the earth. And a day before, the people who used to see Qarun and says, we wish we were like him, they prayed to Allah and said, oh Allah, thank you that you did not make us like Qarun, otherwise we would have also been destroyed. On the commentary of this ayat, there's a hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, which I will mention. This is a scenario, and the hadith is on this. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentioned that Qarun was the kinsman of Musa alayhi salam, a son of his paternal uncle, meaning he was a cousin of Musa alayhi salam. He was well versed in worldly knowledge, and he was extremely jealous of Musa alayhi salam and refused to pay zakat. The first thing he did is that he refused to pay zakat, although Musa alayhi salam told him that he had been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to receive zakat from him. What is more, he said to people, Musa wants you to rob you of your property in the name of zakat. Meaning, Qarun started accusing Musa alayhi salam and telling people that Musa alayhi salam just wants to rob you and he wants to take your wealth in the name of zakat. He commanded you to observe salat and you obeyed him patiently. He gave you other commandments and you obeyed against him. Now that he's demanding zakat, you will have to pay it, you should not do so. So at this moment, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says in the hadith that the people says, you are very true, what should we do? So Qarun and the people who did not want it to give zakat, they got together and they made a plan, more or less to affect the hadith. They got ready a woman and told her that when Musa alayhi salam will start preaching the people to the greatness of Allah, you stand right in the middle and accuse Musa alayhi salam of committing adultery. So the next day, Qarun himself went to Musa alayhi salam and says, do you want me to gather the people so you can speak in front of them the greatness of Allah? So Musa alayhi salam says, why not? Right. The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Al-mu'minu ghirrun kareem. Mu'min is nice and polite. Ghirrun kareem. In Urdu they say bhola bhala. Wal fajiru khibbul la'in. And those who are fajr, they're very crook in their minds. Right? The hadith of Rasulullah says this. So now Qarun told Musa alayhi salam that I will call the people for you. Next day, the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says, everyone was gathered. In the middle of the conversation when Musa alayhi salam was speaking the greatness of Allah, this woman got up. And she says that Musa alayhi salam had committed adultery with me. So Musa alayhi salam, being the Nabi of Allah, forced her to take the oath of Allah and say, if you're telling me the truth. So she became scared because of the ru'b and the greatness of the Nabi of Allah. And this, she spoke that Qarun and the people paid me to say this. At this moment, Musa alayhi salam, in the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, started to weep and cry because of the accusation which was put upon him. So at that time, Musa alayhi salam went to sajda. And he cried and cried until the revelation came that, "Oh Musa, we will give you the power over the land. And whatever you force it and whatever you order it, it will obey you." At this moment, Musa alayhi salam ordered the earth to swallow Qarun. So much so that the Qarun in its entirety was entirely swallowed inside the ground. Now at this moment, subhanAllah, after this, the revelation came. And Qarun was begging Musa alayhi salam to forgive him. "I made a mistake, forgive him." So after this, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says, after this the revelation came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Musa alayhi salam. "The people were beseeching you for pardon and crying you for help by my honor and my dignity. If he would have cried once to me, I would have pardoned him and taken him out." Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if Qarun would have asked me once, I would have taken him out. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu in the commentary of this writes that having all the wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted him, with all the knowledge that Allah had granted him, leaving the commandment of not giving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala became the reasons of his destruction. Ibn Kathir rahmatullah alayhi writes that Qarun was one of the best reciters of Torah. Ibn Kathir writes this, that amongst one of the best reciters of Torah was Qarun himself. But what led him towards this destruction was the love of the wealth which was in his heart. So brothers and elders, this is also our responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more or less 600 times in the Quran says to give zakat for the sake of Allah. إِقَامُ الصَّلَاةِ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ إِقَامُ الصَّلَاةِ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ. And there are so many people amongst the ummah who are not even paying zakat, which is the first obligation upon us. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, if a person has not fulfilled the haqq and taken someone else's wealth, Allah, even if they give the entire world on the day of Qiyamah, this will not be compensated against the adhab of Allah on the day of Qiyamah. So it is our responsibility. Allah gives us so much to eat, so much to drink, so much to wear, and so much extra that Allah has given us. A small portion of our wealth for the sake of Allah is nothing hard for us. So usually in the month of Ramadan, a lot of brothers and sisters give this, So it is our responsibility. A brother was mentioning, I think yesterday, that he says, for the last 10 years, on all of my gold, I never knew that I had to give zakat. I just found out today that I had to give zakat. For 10 years, I have never given zakat. Right? Subhanallah, this is the amal that we are going through. So these are the little things that we must understand and we must give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 2.5% of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, after all of the savings that we have done, this is our responsibility on our shoulder. And if we are not doing so, then we are rejecting the order of Allah 600 times in the Quran. This is one of the greatest amal that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned. So inshallah, on the future few days, inshallah, we'll be speaking about the significance of zakat itself, how much we have to give, from which wealth we have to give, inshallah. If anyone has any specific questions regarding this, which we have to go, which wealth we have to give upon, inshallah, I'll be also present, inshallah, here. We'll also here the whole day, inshallah, so we can discuss amongst each other, inshallah. May Allah give us the ability to practice this and fulfill the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu.